Hey y'all, new day, new verses as we start off the new year, continuing on into chapter 21 of Matthew. Today we are doing verses 23 through 27, the authority of Jesus challenged. There's a lot of fun in here, so let's dig in. When Jesus returned to the temple, 23, when Jesus returned to the temple and began teaching, the leading priests and elders came to him. They demanded, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you the right?" "I'll tell you by what authority I do these things if you answer one question," Jesus replied. "Does John's authority to baptize come from heaven, or was it merely human?" They talked it over among themselves. "If we say it was from heaven, he will ask us why we didn't believe John. But if we say it was merely human, we'll be mobbed because the people believed John was a prophet." So they finally replied, "We don't know." And Jesus replied, "Then I won't tell you by what authority I do these things." I really enjoyed this verse because there's that little bit of playful, I don't want to call it cheek, but just that kind of hint and nod. Because Jesus knows what's in the heart. I mean, he's the Word made flesh, the Son of God. He knows what they're thinking. He knows what all of us are thinking and feeling, because, again, God. And I find it really quite funny because the religious leaders here, the ones that are annoyed, they're, the priests, the elders, the leading groups of people, they're indignant. We've already talked about the little fact here that they're indignant seeing what happens back up in the verse 12 section when Jesus is clearing the temple. They're not happy to see good things. And it's interesting to me that the two main components that seem to drive their thinking are pride and fear. The reason I say this is because they're afraid of the mob. That's obvious. The people believe he was a prophet, and if we say he wasn't, then they'll beat the tar out of us. Well, if they know something you don't, why? What are they seeing that you're not? And if it's from heaven like they said, it will be a question of, well, why didn't you believe him? The pride keeps them in a place of not learning anything new. And so while they're sitting there talking to the actual Messiah that many of these have been praying and begging for, especially as religious leaders, the people who have been diligently wanting the Messiah to come, and they're talking to him and missing him entirely. They see the way being clear, the path being made clear for Jesus by John, but they don't want to see it. They're getting indignant because they're being called out for their behavior. And yeah, when somebody says that the way you're behaving is completely garbage, it can sting. But instead of getting arrogant or angry or prideful or letting that moment of reprimand become shame and then fear, use it. Let it become wisdom. Because these kind of things help. If you're truly willing to receive. Because if they had put down their pride, they would have seen that John was a prophet. That he is, even to this day, hundreds, thousands of years later, he's still actively showing that there is a difference between the two behaviors. And I find that, generally speaking, most of the time, not all of it, but a lot of the time when we get into these struggle places with God, it's due to pride or arrogance or fear. That we're butting heads because we don't want to release the thing we need to. If they had released their grip on the authority they think they have, they would see the one true authority. If they would release the power they think they hold, they would see the one who has all the power. If they would release the fear that is dominating their way of thinking, they would grow and finally mature. Why should Jesus answer their question? We know that his authority comes from God because we've seen it all the way through, not just in the text, but in our own lives, especially in my life, I would say. But if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. We see God actively work. We're able to lay down the parts of us that we don't want when we chase after God. I found in my experience in my walk that God is very much interested in asking these kind of questions. These questions that don't necessarily derail a type of footing, but can cause a trip-up moment for a person blindly walking on a path. At least enough to go, oh, hey, I probably should recognize where I'm putting my feet. And I think we'll see more on that expounded later around verse 44. Because it is this need to lay down our way of doing it and understand that God sees it differently. As God's not going to tell the leaders that he is the Son of God by his words, when he's been doing it by his actions this entire time, in the temple, on the regular, healing the sick, opening the eyes of the blind, the lame walk, the dead live again. All of these different signs and wonders that should scream out to the learned that he is here, actively working in the midst. And they refuse to believe it. Because the one heralding this beautiful good news was also saying, guys, you can't keep playing this game. That's what John was doing. It's why he got arrested in the first place. He was calling out Herod for having an adulterous relationship with Herodias, his brother's wife. All he was doing was calling out, like, guys, we can't keep doing that. To the Pharisees, to the religious leaders, guys, you can't keep doing that. There's a way we have to live, and this ain't it. The people recognized it, and we're going to see more of that in the parable of the two sons, of the parable of the evil farmers, which I think we're going to come down into one big section tomorrow. Because in all honesty, all of it connects together. From page 1 to the very last on whatever version you have. It's all connected together. The ability to see it all connected together comes when we lay down what we think to be vision. Letting God give us what we truly need. Including the vision to know where to go. The wisdom. These Pharisees and Sadducees, they should have it. They should have the knowledge at the very least. But because they don't want to admit that they were wrong, they gain nothing. In fact, they end up losing everything. Because the temple which they hold so dear gets destroyed not very much long after this. A couple of years. Another proof of Jesus speaking truth when he says not a single stone will left standing. So what if we take the opportunity in each day and say, I don't want my pride. I don't want my haughtiness. I don't want arrogancy. I don't want to put my head in the sand and ignore. I want to lay down me, pick up my cross, and learn what love really is. We want the Lord to show us what love really is. Not this childish Eros-esque love. Not this behavior of, well, I'll only love those who love me. No, real self-sacrificial love. Because that is what he came to do. The suffering servant, the Messiah. And all the way through the Isaiah, the offspring from Genesis, all the way through everything pointing to the fact that Jesus has come to set it right. To do what only God can do. And isn't it interesting that the same difficulties that the Pharisees and Sadducees are having here, we see in our modern day. People who are obsessed with the religion rather than the spirit and the relationship. And so we end up telling God what we want him to do. We end up demanding of the Lord what his miracles should look like. And so we end up asking questions like Gideon did. Well, God, will you do this magic trick? Shall I know? Will you do this magic trick? Shall I know? Will you do this magic trick? Shall I know? Follow me here. If I've said I've got you, I've got you. Because God is consistent yesterday, today, and forever. See, we don't have to hold pride like these do. So that we're wrestling between, well, what do I do to save face? God knows your heart. Who are you saving face for? People, they're just as broken as the rest of us. Broken people break people. And things and everything else. So, okay. So what's the point of masquerading for people? to play one more round of, well, I'm not broken and you're not broken and you're not broken and I'm not broken. No, 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 no. If we weren't broken, we would be able to love like this and it not be almost foreign to many. If we weren't broken, kindness, love, decency, patience, long-suffering, the fruits of the Spirit would be ample in every life. And like I've said before, this is not a book of morality. This is a love letter to a compromised world, to a broken people, that says if you will stop acting like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious elders, and instead lay down the parts of you don't want in the first place. Lay down the fear that worries about what the mob thinks. Lay down the angst of trying to get your way in God's face. Lay down the trepidation of thinking that God won't see you through. Because how can an omnipresent God bail on you? How can a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever stop loving? This is the question that many people wrestle with when it comes to the New Testament and Old Testament. You're like, isn't God bipolar? No. The reading is. It is. Because it's a love letter. It's one where it says, if you stop trying to game God, you will find life. Stop trying to tell him what forgiveness looks like. Well, I can forgive everybody, but not that person. Cool, then you're not forgiven. It's in here. Well, you can go right back to that lovely little prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others who trespass against us. Find it exactly here because he straight up says, and if you do not forgive others, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. Doesn't sound like God's stuttering there. It's right there, verse 14 of Matthew 6. If you forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you refuse to forgive others, your Father will not forgive your sins. There's no stutter. So, do you want to try and game God and eventually lose? Or do you want to lay down the BS and live? Because this same game that the Pharisees are doing with Jesus, the same thing that Gideon did. It's the same thing that happens almost all the way throughout the Bible with people who don't want to just let God be God. Happens in this current time too. Saying, well, God, if it's this, or God, if it's this, or... rather than just being honest. So they only had to answer one single question. Whose authority? Was John acting because heaven hadn't do it, or merely human? All they had to ask, or all they had to answer. That was all that was asked of them. But they didn't want the answer as much as they wanted to keep living the lie they had promoted for themselves. One where they knew what was going to happen. The lie where they think they're in the know. Well, we know what's going to happen. You do. How? Are you omniscient? Omnipresent? Do you see the future? Do you exist outside of time? Because it seems to me that tomorrow is promised to no one. And each second is a gift. So why not use that gift as an opportunity to be learned how to really love? So that when God asks the question of, will you follow me? The answer isn't, well, if you do this. It's, of course. Even if, like we'll see tomorrow with the parable of the two sons, it takes a minute to get there. The one who says no, but then eventually does, is doing what they're told in the end. So, which would you rather be? A person who chases after God with the same kind of reckless abandon that He has for us. Loving Him because He loved us first. And being learned daily what that love really looks like, as His mercies are new every morning. Or would you rather play the world's game? Would you rather try to game God and lose yourself in the end completely? Because you can't lie to God. You can only BS yourself. And in doing so, you prove yourself foolish. All wisdom comes from God. He pours it out without reproach, without laying into us in any way, shape, or form. He gives it over and abundant because we ask for it. You don't have to game God. Just be honest with yourself and with Him, because He already knows. And if you can't lie to God, what's the point of lying in the first place? Because God knows. So lying between people, He's going to see the truth of it in the heart and in the act. So which do you want to be? Do you want to be the person who says, God is my refuge and my strength, my source of hope and my source of life? Or do you want to be the person that's spending time in a huddle with fellow lost people trying to tell God what it looks like to be God? He says forgive, so we forgive. He says love, so we love. He forgave us, so we forgive others. Jesus said it all right on the cross. We get the opportunity daily to chase after Him, His way of doing it, to be learned what it looks like to really live. So that whether or not you're on or off is inconsequential, because you truly have life. These were more interested in ignoring the fact that John was a prophet, only worried about denying it because of fear of the crowds. The people who don't want to admit truth because if they do, it will mean that everything they've been doing is folly. In their pride, they become even more lost than they already are. And in the end, God uses them to crown Himself king. Which itself is an interesting place, because it becomes a place of release that God will use everything to His glory. We say it, well, we believe it. Because in this verse, in these verses, I see the opportunity to lay down fear, to lay down pride, to lay down arrogance, to lay down foolishness, and pick up new life from a source of humility. Because if they had humbled themselves and just answered the question, well, this authority came from heaven, why didn't you believe Him? We didn't know how. We solved all of it. But their fear, their pride, the arrogance, the pain prevents any source of life from moving in. Because they're stuck holding on to what they think it looks like, rather than seeing the one who is. Why don't we use every opportunity to lay down us and to pick up Him? To not play by anything the world calls rules, and live by God's. Where three things last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. That's the world we're called to live in. The reality of the things we do not see but know to be true. So what will you do? In these seasons of trials and tribulations, of heartaches and pains, and second verse same as the first, trials and difficulties, will you stoop to the world's level, or will you rise above it by being lifted by the one who is above all? Done by picking up your cross and following Him. The option is ours. Me and mine, I'm chasing after God with everything I have. So what is yours? Because I've tasted the fruit of the world and it has nothing to offer. What about you? What fruit would you rather eat from? What tree would you rather go to? What source of life do you want to pull from? The source of life? Or the fake one the world has? And become like the Pharisees and the Sadducees in this text. All of it circling back to this place of, do you want God to be God, or do you want His job? That's the question. And if you want to be God, you will be lost in folly. Because we don't know how. We don't even know how to be human. If we did, love would not be a foreign idea. Think about it. I'll see you guys tomorrow for verses 28 into the end of chapter 22. Or into the beginning of chapter 22. My apologies. I will see you guys then. May His favor be upon you. Know that you are loved. And know, with a K, that He will grab you out of the fire. You just have to stop running toward it. Let Him be God. And you will truly live. I promise you that. I'll see you then.